Okay, welcome back in. I want to see if I can do a quick review between Monday and Thursday's action from the National Hockey League. So on Monday, we had a grand total of 4 games, starting with the Devils playing host to the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks would win by a final score of 4-3, and the game winner would come off the stick of Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who scored in the game earlier, and he had the shootout winner for the Canucks. So they'd won 4-3. The New York Islanders played host to the Columbus Blue Jackets. This game also ended 4-3, and it also went to a shootout, and I clicked on Tuesday by mistake. This would end 4-3 as well. And the game winner would come from the stick of Adam Fantilli, who got his 23rd goal of the year. A battle in the Central Division as we had the Dallas Stars playing host to the Minnesota Wild. Wyatt Johnston would get the game-winning goal. His on a power play, his 26th of the season from Harley and Hintz, with under 5 minutes to go in the second. The Utah Hockey Club played host to the Detroit Red Wings. Marco Kasper would get the game-winning goal a minute and a half into the second period, giving the Wings a 2-1 lead. For Kasper, that'd be his 14th goal of the season from DeBrincat and Edmondson. The Red Wings would go on to score 3 more goals, winning by a final score of 5-1. Tuesday, we had a grand total of 10 games on tap. Starting in St. Louis, as we had the Blues, who were red hot, taking on the Montreal Canadiens. Dylan Holloway would give the Blues a 2-1 lead with just 6 seconds to go in the first. That would end up being the game-winning goal. They would score 4 more goals after that, blowing out the Habs 6-1. The Buffalo Sabres played host to the Ottawa Senators. Tage Thompson would get the game-winning goal 1 minute and 23 seconds into the third. His 35th of the season, assisted by Benson and Dahlin. So the Sabres would win 3-2. The Toronto Maple Leafs played host to the Philadelphia Flyers. The game-winning goal would come off the stick of Bob McMahon, 1:45 of the second period, getting his 20th of the season, assisted by John Tavares and William Nylander. The final score would be 7-2, and what turned out to be John Tortorella's last game as a head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. He was let go the next day. The Tampa Bay Lightning played host to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ryan McNaughton would make it 2-0, 13:30 of the first. That would be the game-winning goal, his third of the year, assisted by Kucherov and Ceramic. The Lightning would score 4 more goals on top of that winning by a final score of 6-1. The Carolina Hurricanes played host to the Nashville Predators. Luke Evangelista would make it 2-0, 4:01 of the second period, getting the game-winning goal, his 8th of the season from Forsberg and Del Gaizo. The Preds would win 3-1. The Vegas Golden Knights were in Minnesota to take on the Wild. Brett Howden would score 8:22 of the second period, giving the Vegas Golden Knights a 2-0 lead. He would have the game-winning goal, his 20th of the season from Noah Hannafin. The Golden Knights would go on to win by a final score of 5-1. 2 of the hottest teams took to the ice in Winnipeg as the Jets played host to the Washington Capitals. This game would need to go to overtime, where Nick Ehlers would get the game-winning goal, his 24th of the year, from Sandberg and Adam Lowry, 1:28 of the overtime frame. And with that victory, the Jets are the second team to make it into the postseason. Ironically, the Capitals were the first. 2 teams that used to have a bit of a rivalry back in the 90s, and it was much watch hockey, to say the least, between the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings. But due to the fact that the Red Wings are now in the East, they only see each other twice a year, so it definitely doesn't have the same effect as it did back, like I said, in the 90s. Devin Tays would score his 8th goal of the season in the second period, 4 minutes and 39 seconds to be exact, on the power play from Nietzsche and Brock Nelson. Giving the Avalanche a 3-1 lead, he would have the game-winning goal. They would win by a final score of 5-2. The Calgary Flames played host to the Seattle Kraken. This game would need to go to overtime, and the game-winning goal would come off the stick of Nazem Kadri, getting his 28th goal of the year with just a minute and 2 seconds to go in the overtime frame, assisted by Coronado. So the Flames would win 4-3. And the last game on Tuesday took place between the Los Angeles Kings, who have a crazy home record, not going to lie, against the New York Rangers. Philip Deneau would get the game-winning goal with 2 minutes and 12 seconds to go in the second on the power play from Trevor Moore and Warren Foegele. 17:48 of the second period. They would go on to win by a final score of 3-1. All right, now we're off to Wednesday, where I believe we had a fairly light schedule. Just 4 games on Wednesday's tap, starting in New York as the Islanders played host to the Vancouver Canucks, who are continuing their road trip. Derek Forbort would get the game-winning goal with 23 seconds to go in the second, giving the Canucks a 3-2 lead. That would be his second goal of the season from DeBrusk and Pius Suter. The Canucks would go on to win by a final score of 5-2. The New Jersey Devils were in Chicago to take on the Blackhawks. And I clicked on Thursday by mistake. Hold on a second. This phone is very sensitive. Come on. So I talked about Derek Forbort, and there. It's the Blackhawks and the Devils. There we go. I also have to be very careful when I'm trying to swipe. Dawson Mercer would give the Devils a 4-2 lead, 11:01 of the second period on the power play, his 17th of the season from Luke Hughes and Jesper Bratt. That would be the game-winning goal. The Devils would go on to win by a final score of 5-3. The Edmonton Oilers, who are starting to kind of fall apart at the end of the season. I mean, when you have the 2 best players in the league out with McDavid and Draisaitl, you're definitely bound to be hurting, to say the least. But they played host to the Dallas Stars. Jason Robertson would give the Stars a 4-0 lead with 4.5 minutes to go in the second period. That would end up being the game-winning goal. The Oilers would rally, getting 3 straight goals, but unfortunately they fell short. For Robertson, that'd be his 32nd goal of the season on the power play from Harley and Rupe Hintz. The Anaheim Ducks played host to the Boston Bruins. Here are we. Jackson Lacombe would give the Ducks a 3-1 lead with 2 minutes and 3 seconds to go in the second period. It would end up being the game-winning goal, and for Lacombe, that'd be his 13th goal of the season. As you can see on the screen, the Ducks would win by a final score of 6-2, so they would add 3 more goals in after that. Okay, so yeah, Wednesday was a very short recap, and now Thursday. So we had a total of 8, 9, 10 games on tap for Thursday. Starting in Philadelphia, as we had the Flyers playing host to the Montreal Canadiens, who are continuing their road trip of their own. Who were continuing the road trip. There we go. Sean Couturier would score 11:43 of the third period, putting the Flyers up 5-2, getting a power play goal unassisted. They would go on to win by a final score of 6-4. The Buffalo Sabres played host to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Matthias Samuelsson would get the game-winning goal, 5 minutes and 20 seconds of the second period, getting his 4th of the year from Rosen and Rasmus Dahlin. They would score 3 more goals on top of that, winning by a final score of 7-3. 2 teams in the Atlantic, as we had the Detroit Red Wings playing host to the Ottawa Senators. Oh, I already passed the 4th goal, sorry. Michael Amadio would give the Senators a 4-1 lead, 8:44 of the third period, getting his 11th goal of the season, assisted by Highmore. They would go on to win by a final score of 4-3, so the Red Wings would make a late rally, but unfortunately they fell short. Wow, a blowout. Jake Gensel would open up the scoring, 1:30 of the first, giving the Tampa Bay Lightning a 1-0 lead. His 35th goal of the year from Kucherov and McDonough. They would score 7 more goals on Utah after that, winning by a final score of 8-0. Wow, it's pretty bad. The Minnesota Wild played host to the Washington Capitals. The game-winning goal would come off the stick of Matt Boldy. With just 9 seconds to go in the second period, he would get his 24th goal of the year, assisted by Rossi and Hino Stroza. They would add 1 more goal in the third, winning by a final score of 4-2. The red-hot St. Louis Blues went into Nashville to take on the Predators. The game-winning goal would come off the stick of Dylan Holloway, who's having a career year to say the least with the St. Louis Blues, getting his 26th goal of the season from Robert Thomas and Nick Leddy. 12:19 of the third period, and that's where the score would stand at the end of the game. The Calgary Flames played host to the Dallas Stars. The game-winning goal would come off the stick of Michael Granlund, 14:11 of the second period, getting his 19th of the season from Marchment and Matt Duchene. 14 minutes and 11 seconds of the second period, they would add 2 more goals and win by a final score of 5-2. The second shutout happened in Colorado as the Avalanche played host to the Los Angeles Kings. Logan O'Connor would score 5 minutes and 25 seconds of the second period, getting his 9th goal of the year from Cale Makar and Jack Drury. They would add 3 more goals on top of that, winning by a final score of 4-0. And if I missed this, for O'Connor, that was his 9th goal of the year. The Seattle Kraken played host to the injury-plagued Edmonton Oilers. The game-winning goal would come off the stick of Jaden Schwartz, who had 2 goals. 3 minutes and 24 seconds of the second period. He would get his 23rd of the year unassisted. They would add 4 more goals on top of that, winning by a score of 6-1. So the Kraken blew out the Oilers. And the last game took place between the San Jose Sharks and the Toronto Maple Leafs. This game would need to be decided in a shootout, where Macklin Celebrini would get his 22nd goal of the year. The shootout winner, the Sharks, would sweep the Toronto Maple Leafs, because I'm pretty sure the Sharks went into Toronto and defeated them earlier in this season. So the Sharks got 4 out of a total 4 points against the Leafs. Now we'll take a look at the standings. So you can still see it at the very top. Despite the overtime loss, the Toronto Maple Leafs gained a point. They are still in first place, or they are in first place in the Atlantic Division with a record of 43-25-4. The Florida Panthers are 1 point behind them with a record of 43-25-3. And the Lightning are now a point behind the Leafs for first place in the Atlantic with a record of 42-25-5. So 3 teams are separated by 1 point. And a lot of them have 10 or 11 games to go. This is going to be a nail-biter, to say the least. All right, in the Metropolitan Division, we already knew that the Washington Capitals made the postseason. After 72 games played, they have a record of 47-16-9. They have 103 points. And I've said this several times in my videos that it's safe to say that I think Washington will more than likely get the Metropolitan Division this year. The Carolina Hurricanes are in second place with a record of 43-24-4. They have 90 points. The New Jersey Devils, even though they don't have Jack Hughes, they are still in third place in that Metropolitan Division with a record of 30-28-7. They have 83 points. The 2 teams in the wild card, as I'm scrolling up, look like this. So the Ottawa Senators have a record of 38-28-5. They have 11 games to go in their schedule, and they have 81 points. The Montreal Canadiens, despite losing 2 games in a row, are still holding on to that last playoff spot in the Eastern Conference with a record of 33-29-9. They have 75 points. And then you're going to see how crowded it is just below them in the standings. And I just want to have maybe these teams, I'd say, are still in contention. The Islanders and Rangers both have 74 points with a record of 32-29-10 and 34-32-6 respectively. The Blue Jackets are 2 points back of Montreal with a record of 32-29-9. They have 73 points. And I think Detroit, they have 10 games left. They're only 3 points out of a playoff spot. So you can't say that they're not still in contention, because if they get 2 wins in a row, they could easily hop over a couple of teams in the standings. They have a record of 33-33-6. They have 72 points. The rest of the Eastern Conference looks like this. Now, no one is technically eliminated, but the Bruins, as we speak, are 6 points out of a playoff spot, and they would need 8 to hop over Montreal and the Rangers and the Islanders and the Blue Jackets and the Red Wings respectively in order for them to get back into a playoff spot. So I think they're more than likely going to miss the playoffs. They have a record of 30-34-9. They have 69 points. The Pittsburgh Penguins are in a similar situation as the Bruins, where they have 69 points and they have 1 more game played. The Penguins only have 8 games left on the schedule, and I find it very hard to believe that they're going to win all 8 games. and all the teams above them are going to lose the remaining of their games. So it's likely the Penguins are going to miss the postseason for the third straight season, which is going to be very odd because from like 2006 to 2022, they made it for like 20 or 16 straight years. And I think it's safe to say that they are definitely in a rebuild as we speak. So who knows what's going to happen with the likes of like Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Erik Karlsson once the off season hits. All right, their interstate rival, the Philadelphia Flyers, have a record of 29, 36, and 9. They have 67 points. They're 8 points out of a playoff spot. Again, not technically eliminated, but they'd have to win 5 games in a row, and they only have 8 games remaining. The Buffalo Sabres are in last place in the Eastern Conference with a record of 30, 35, and 6. They have 66 points, so they're technically 9 points out of a playoff spot, and they would have to win 5 games in a row, and only 11 games are remaining on their schedule. So it's very unlikely that Buffalo is going to make the playoffs, and that's going to make their playoff or non-playoff appearance streak to, I believe, 14 seasons. The last time they made it was in 2011, so that's pretty crazy to think. It's been 14 years since Buffalo's been in the postseason. All right, now we're off to the West. So you can see there's an X beside the Winnipeg Jets in the Central Division. They have a record of 49, 19, and 4. They have 102 points. The Stars are now just 4 points back of Winnipeg, so the Jets don't necessarily have that division locked down. The Dallas Stars have a record of 47, 21, and 4. They have 98 points. The Colorado Avalanche have a record of 45, 25, and 3. They have 93 points. Over in the Pacific Division, the Vegas Golden Knights are in first place with a record of 43, 20, and 8. They have 94 points with 11 games remaining. The Kings also have 11 games remaining. They have a record of 40, 22, and 9. They have 89 points. And the Edmonton Oilers, who I said are starting to reel after 72 games played, they are 41, 26, and 5. They have 87 points. And if the playoffs started now, they would be the away team against the Kings. The 2 teams in the wild card, both from the Central Division, are the Minnesota Wild. They have a record of 41, 27, and 5. They have 87 points. The St. Louis Blues, who would have thought that they could possibly catch Minnesota in the standings? They have a record of 39, 28, and 7. They have 85 points. Despite having one more game played than Minnesota, they're only 2 points back. So if they continue this hot streak and they've won 8 games in a row, then they could easily flip positions in the standings. It's crazy how hot you can get this late in the season, and the Blues are living proof of that. All right, so I'll take a look at the teams that I would say are in contention. The Vancouver Canucks are 5 points out of the playoff spot. They do have 2 games on hand with St. Louis, so that does give them the slight advantage. They have a record of 34, 26, and 12. They have 80 points, so they would have to for sure win 3 games in a row. And if they have those extra 2 games on St. Louis, they should defeat those respective teams if they want to make a playoff push. But 5 points out of a playoff spot this late in the season, it's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. If you're a Vancouver fan, I feel for you, but I don't have that much hope. Again, even though you have 10 games to go, that's technically 20 points you could catch or 20 points you could get. I just don't see it happening. The Calgary Flames have 11 games remaining on their schedule. Their record is 34, 26, and 11. They have 79 points. So they're 6 points out of the playoff spot, so they would have to win at least 4 games for sure and hope that Vancouver and St. Louis start losing. And it doesn't look like the Blues, at least, are going to be losing a lot of their games, even though they only have 8 remaining. All right, so we'll take a look at the rest of the Western Conference. So again, I'm not trying to disrespect Utah. They have had a very good season in their first year of existence. They're 10 points out of a playoff spot. They're not technically eliminated, but due to the fact that they have 10 games remaining, they would have to win at least 6 or 7 of those, or maybe even all 10 of their games if they want to make some noise, because 10 games would be 20 points. So they could technically finish the season with 95 points. But I don't see them winning 10 games in a row. So I think Utah are likely on the outside looking in when it comes to the postseason. But you had a very successful year. I mean, if you don't look at the overtime losses / shootout losses, you had an above 500 season. So fairly respectable first year for the Utah Hockey Club. And I can't wait for them to come up with an actual name for next season. That's like my one rant in all my videos with Utah. The Anaheim Ducks have a record of 31, 32, and 8. They have 70 points. They're 15 points out of the playoff spot. So therefore, they'd have to win 8 games in a row. They have 11 games remaining. So it's very, very unlikely the Ducks are going to make the playoffs, which would make their non-playoff appearances to, hold on a second, 19, 20, 21, 22, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 7 seasons without hockey in the Orange County. The Seattle Kraken have a record of 31, 36, and 6. They have 68 points. They are 17 points back. 17 points out of a playoff spot, and they have 9 games remaining. So if they lose one more game, you will more than likely see an E beside their name. So it's very unfortunate that 3 of the first 4 seasons they have not made the playoffs, even though they had such high hopes after the 2023 season. It looked like they could be contenders last year and this year, but they have truly fallen from grace. We'll see what next season brings. Nashville has officially been eliminated from the playoffs after 72 games played. They have a record of 27, 37, and 8. They have 62 points. The Chicago Blackhawks have a record of they have a record of 21, 42, and 9. They have 51 points, and the San Jose Sharks have the worst record in the league with a record of 20, 42, and 9. They have 49 points. So technically 3 out of 16 teams have been eliminated so far. That means that there's 13 teams that will have an E beside their name by the end of the season. Now, I did say I wanted this to be a short video. I'm coming up to the 22-minute mark, but at least now I'm caught up with the scores and the standings for the National Hockey League. I'm hoping to do a bit of a better job staying up to date, considering the season is coming down to an end, and some exciting hockey will be played in the month of April, May, and June once the postseason gets started, and I couldn't be more excited. All right, that's going to take care of this video. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.